Good morning, branches. We will continue our study in this short but insightful epistle to the Philippians in our quest, by God's grace, to find new ways to see and to understand His revelation to us. So allow me to just begin by reading the text for today. It's found in Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 to 18. Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill His good purpose. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky, as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. But even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me. So whenever a passage begins with therefore, obviously it's a response to whatever teaching or context has preceded it. So this passage is meant to be the natural progression of what was taught before, namely the call to be like Jesus in His character, humility, obedience, compassion, and sacrifice, and the recognition of His lordship, that all things were created through Him in the beginning. In essence, He was the source of everything, and in the end, all will again return to Him, as it were, to bow their knee in submission to Him. This, of course, is reinforced in other passages, like on the Alpha and Omega. And so we know that Jesus is the beginning and the end of all things. Everything comes and goes through Him. But the real struggle then and challenge for us is in the middle, the in-between. Do you know what I mean by that? The Middle Earth experience we live in, where we try to make sense of life and find meaning and purpose to contribute in a positive way. We embrace Jesus as the origin, the author of our faith, the one who grants us spiritual birth, and we trust Him with our destiny, the one who secures our salvation, the one that will welcome us for all eternity. But how do we incorporate Jesus into this proverbial middle? The here and now, the present, the routine and the grind of daily life, and in the inevitable moments of crisis and tribulation that we encounter. As we look at this passage and how it applies to God, to us, and to others, I want to highlight in particular this metaphor that Paul uses for calling us to be like shining stars. So let's take a moment. I'd like you to get in, just turn around and get in small groups. And it won't be long, but I want you to discuss this concept of light. I want you to pull your cell phones out. So get in small groups and we'll have just a brief discussion. Okay. So here are your questions. So take out your cell phones and turn on the flashlight. And when you look around the room, you observe various forms of light. We have the daylight outside, we have the skylights, we have light bulbs in the room, and we have our cell phones with the flashlight on. So I want you just to kind of whet the appetite, get your mind processing. What are the principles of light? What are attributes and principles, qualities of light? And how does it impact and affect its surroundings? Okay? So just have a general discussion on those two thoughts. So I'm not going to ask each group for feedback, but if you get the answers right, you can raise your hand, okay? So when we think of principles or quality of light. I think there's one clear one, which I'm sure many of you touched on, right? That all light has a source, whether it's battery, electrical, sunlight, etc. And of course, we can say in the bigger picture that God is the source of all light, both supernatural and natural. Now, most religions, whether polytheistic or monotheistic or indigenous, even Greek mythology, will align with the notion of a source God, that there is a divine being that is the source behind all life, including other celestial beings, matter, nature, the universe, etc. But I think sometimes in Christianity, we attempt to define God so precisely, according to his character and his attributes, that we can sometimes lose sight of the grandeur of God. We analyze each species of tree rather than beholding the majesty of the vast forest that surrounds us. So let's pan out a little bit this morning and just try and grasp and appreciate the wonder of God as the source of all existence. So light is always generated. It has a power source, whether it's the sunlight or a bolt of lightning or your kitchen light or a candle light or your cell phone. Light must be generated, empowered, fueled. Light can be reflected as well, but again, it still relies upon the original power source that sends the light to be reflected. The Apostle John says, God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. God does not need a power source to be light. He is the source himself. Light emanates from his very being, from his character. Jesus, in turn, carried this source of light like an Olympic torch. Even more so, he fully embodied the divine light, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Consider then some other qualities. Light exposes reality. It reveals truth. It shows things as they really are. Like God in the supernatural, light has no equal in the natural world. All darkness scatters and dissipates at the presence of light. And those who live in the darkness with evil intention flee like cockroaches when exposed to that light. Light inspires hope, and it is often used as a symbol of hope. And it gives guidance. It shows a pathway. Your word is a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path. Light creates and nourishes life. It promotes healing. The life-giving benefits of sunlight are extraordinary, not only for plant life, but for all life. Divine light indeed possesses all these principles and more. But whereas natural light is one-dimensional, divine light is multifaceted. And as we will discuss further, it incorporates many other attributes. A second point would be that light has conduits or reflectors. Light bulbs, candles, skylights, cell phones, those are all examples of conduits. The moons, the stars, the ocean are all examples of reflectors. So we, in our humanness, are not the source of light. We cannot generate divine light. We are simply conduits or instruments and or reflectors of that source of all light and love and life. We are like a flashlight. This is all I can find anymore is a little tiny flashlight register. Well, couldn't find a real flashlight. But anyway, so like this flashlight, we are an instrument, a vessel. We have a little light bulb, right? Meaning we're created in the image of God, so we have a certain capacity, right, to shine light. But we know if I unscrew this, we see that there's a power source, right? There's a battery. So because of the battery, I can turn on this light and God's light can shine through me. But without that power source, I no longer have that capacity. I cannot generate the light myself. All I'm useful for basically is being a little bottle opener. So, Paul calls us out to be like shining stars. A star relies on the rays of the sunlight coming from the sun in order to reflect that light and to shine in the universe. So we're called and created to be instruments and reflectors of divine light. In verse 13, Paul describes the phenomenon this way. It is God who works in you to will and to act according to his purpose. That's what divine light looks like, transferring through us. This is Christianity 101, where the rubber meets the road. This is what the proverbial middle is all about. Cultivating and facilitating this work of the Spirit of God, allowing him to will and to act according to his purpose in our lives. Furthermore, it's a sacred privilege that we carry, and it is not to be taken lightly. It's why Paul exhorts us, saying, continue to work out your faith with fear and trembling. A sobering statement, yes, not intended to paralyze us. Rather, to motivate us, not to take this relationship and responsibility with God for granted. Rather, to continue with humility and to be diligent in our faith journey. Paul, as an example, relies on the boundless grace of God, but he doesn't treat it as cheap grace. He recognizes the cost of grace, and he recognizes the privilege of his position. So he labors, he strives, he perseveres, he sacrifices. He allows himself to be imprisoned and, as it were, to be poured out as a drink offering as he channels this divine love upon the Philippian community. Surely Paul could not have done so unless he was tapping into the source God, the one that empowers him as an instrument of light. This leads me to point 3. Our light is our testimony. It's not what we know, it's more who we know. We read Psalm 8 during the worship time and see that David is full of wonder, contemplating the majesty of the great source God. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have put in place. He's taking time to observe, to reflect, to ponder the revelation of God as light in the splendor of the universe. The wonder and awe naturally leads him to a place of humility. What is man that you should think of him? Our faith should be filled with wonder, considering the majesty of creation, the universe, the great lights in the sky, and the divine source of light behind it all. Do we not experience this when we go camping in nature and allow ourselves to get out from the busyness of life and to look at the sky and the glorious night sky? Not only should our personal faith be filled with wonder, but those who observe us, who consider our faith, our deeds, our countenance, they too should be filled with wonder. It should be the wonder they see in us that draws them to the faith. What does this say about our testimony and our witness? I don't know about you, but I don't want to be a religious person. I don't want to be a dead flashlight. I don't want to be some kind of Christian brand trying to sell something or convince people or bully people to believe something. I want to be someone connected to the divine source, a conduit of light, love, life, peace, joy. I want people to be filled with wonder because they see that source of light burning in me. A star can exist in darkness, but it cannot generate its own light. The moon could still orbit the earth, but what use or impact does it have without reflecting the sunlight? Technically, it may still affect the tide or gravity, I don't know. But it couldn't be that guiding light in the night that it was intended to be. I have to have that power source within me to generate the light. The name of our church itself reflects this reality, right? I am the vine, you are the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. The branches need the vine as a source of nourishment and energy to bear fruit. So Jesus implores us, abide in me. Abide in me. That is the key to the source of power. Because God is light, and Jesus is the mediator of that light. It sounds so simple, right? But it's a lifelong struggle. In the parable of the wine and the wineskin, we understand that a wineskin is a good thing. It preserves and serves the wine, but it's the wine that matters. And so when there is new wine, you need a new wineskin. The emphasis is that spirituality is the priority because it represents our communion with God. And religion can be helpful as long as it's facilitating and nurturing that spiritual dynamic. We could say that religion can focus on what we know, whereas spirituality focuses on who we know. The Pharisees knew the law. They knew the prophets, but they didn't know Jesus. So when religion becomes void of spirituality, it becomes more harmful than good. Just like the flashlight loses its sense of meaning and purpose when the batteries are removed, so religion loses its way when spirituality is absent. Our ongoing testimony hinges on this reality. This is true on both the personal and community level. Am I touching people's lives because the light of God is shining through me, or am I just pushing religion on people? Remember, too, that batteries can go dead. We who have been believers for a long time can fall prey to this. We rely on past experiences or our accumulation of biblical knowledge, falling into a routine, etc. Meanwhile, our batteries are draining. I'm confronted with this all the time. The sense that my batteries are dying, that I'm combating burnout, worrying that I will run out of light while trying to help someone in their darkest hours. Jesus himself constantly took time away to cultivate his relationship with God. How much more so do I need to recharge my batteries? Historically, within Christianity, we have made some grave errors on this front in relation to spirituality and religion. The theologian Paul Tillich once wrote, "History has shown that the most terrible crimes against love have been committed in the name of fanatically defended doctrines." This is often the criticism levied at the church, that our fanaticism in defending some doctrines or moral position can end up being perceived as being hateful or judgmental. Paul also warns us in verse 14, do everything without grumbling or arguing. Interestingly, he says this immediately after calling us to let God to will and to act in our lives according to his purpose. Maybe he did so because that is our default mode. It's the quickest way for me to shut down the work and light and purpose of God in my life. If I grumble, it usually means I have moved away from humility and I'm being self-centered, entitled, wanting my own way. Likewise, if I argue, it usually means that I'm prideful, that I want to be right. Throughout church history, how many communities have fallen apart or divided over grumbling and arguing? The world sees it. Hate, judgment, grumbling, arguing. Sounds more like a black hole than a shining star. And if someone accuses me of being a Bible thumper, I probably am. Because in that situation, I probably was acting towards them in a more religious manner than a spiritual way. Instead of shining a light on the path for them, perhaps I was hitting them over the head with my flashlight. Even if I wasn't intending to, perception is reality. So I must constantly be discerning in the way I relate to people so that I am drawing them toward the light rather than repelling them. So what does the light look like? How does it change its surroundings? I taught a class recently on death and dying, and the textbook highlighted studies that have been done on near-death experiences. It is common enough that some serious research has been done on the topic. Now, I have a little comic to show you because I couldn't resist showing this. Gary Larson was my favorite back in the day, and he's depicting a version of near-death experiences with the excited surgeons using a flashlight on their dying patient's eyes, and then later on, that person recounting what they saw. But in all seriousness, we can dismiss some of these things, but as a believer, I think they're worth exploring. So here's what the study found regarding specifically about light, okay, since that's our topic today. Here are just a few of the common experiences involving light. The tunnel experience. After having an out-of-body experience, for many, a portal or a tunnel opens. Initially, they are propelled into darkness. The descriptions are many, but the sense of heading towards an intense light is common. After passing through the tunnel, they usually meet beings of intense light that permeate. Having an out-of-body experience right now. Thanks, that was perfect timing, actually. After passing through the tunnel, a train comes crashing through. So after the tunnel, they usually meet beings of intense light that permeate everything, filling people with feelings of love. As one person said, I could describe this as light or love, and it would mean the same thing. They frequently meet friends and relatives, and then there is usually an experience of encountering a supreme being of light who is understood to be God or a holy presence. The study is expansive, but for the sake of today's teaching, I want to hone in on this relationship of light and love. It's interesting to consider that light and love could be the same substance. The Apostle John seems to understand this, as we find several references in his writings. As quoted earlier, he says, God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. John also says, God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. These are not doctrinal verses. These are not religious practices. This is John taking us back to the source God. God is light, so we must walk in light. God is love, so we must abide in love. God is both light and love, beautifully harmonious and interchangeable, each aspect permeating the other. So if I endeavor to be a shining star, reflecting the light of God unto others, then I must also be reflecting the love of God unto others. I cannot think that I'm truly reflecting the light and truth of God to someone if I'm not also equally manifesting love to them. Paul reinforces this in saying that we are just a noisy gong, a clanging cymbal, if our words are not backed by love. We are being religious and not spiritual. We are waving around an empty flashlight. You never know when opportunity will arise to be a shining star, and how the light and love of God can shine through you to bless another soul. I'm showing you a picture of one of my students. The last time I shared about one of my students, it was a pretty negative experience. Some of you may have remembered. I'm happy to report a very positive experience. In my world religions course, I have them do a field trip, or they can do it independently on their own. And so this student of mine, Mahmoud, is Muslim. And he decided to go to a Baptist church somewhere in Anaheim, I think. And I was relieved when I read his report that he had an amazing experience. He had a wonderful exchange with this pastor, Pastor Chuck. And they had a wonderful exchange. They compared religions and doctrines. But most importantly, the student felt welcome and respected. And he said they spoke of the need to have more religious dialogue, to be able to bring people together. So Mahmoud learned certainly some Christian doctrines while he was there. But I would say that the real impact was because Pastor Chuck in that moment was a shining star. Not waving, not beating him with a dead flashlight, but shining the light, right? Shining the love of God and the light of God to him. So I know that student was impacted in a positive way. It's a beautiful story, but Pastor Chuck didn't have to go anywhere. Mahmoud was the one who stepped out of his comfort zone and came to him. Fortunately, Pastor Chuck was ready to let the light shine. But that leads me to one last principle of light that we need to look at here. Light is meant to be shown in dark places. We want to shine our light, but we often are expecting people to come to the light. If people are in darkness, how are they going to find their way out? If God's calling us to be the light of the world, he then is intending us to go to dark places. What good does your phone light do in here? Right? You can hardly tell that your light is on. What good is our testimony if we keep it to ourselves? I came across this beautiful quote, and it's an anonymous quote. And it says, everyone wants to be the sun to brighten up someone's life. But why not be the moon to shine on someone's darkest hour? This is where Jesus is calling us. He is calling us to find people in their darkest hour so that we can be that moonlight, those shining stars that light the path, that give hope to those trapped in darkness. I want to invite the worship team back up, and as I close, I want to share with you a recent experience I had. Vocationally, in hospice, I have many opportunities to minister to people. But sometimes things come about in unexpected ways. A few weeks ago, I was visiting a patient at a boarding care who was starting to transition. She had been bedridden for some time, unable to communicate, suffering from a myriad of physical and mental conditions. I had no way of knowing if she could even comprehend anything I would say to her. Initially, the family had declined my visits, citing that she was not religious and would not want me there. It seemed almost somewhat hostile. Eventually, and providentially, I was able to visit her to celebrate her birthday and sing a few songs. Thereafter, the family was open to my visits, saying that she enjoyed music and it may be a blessing to her, but no spiritual intervention allowed. I visited her for several months, but did not really know anything about her backstory, and if there would be any reason for her being opposed to spirituality or to God. On my next to last visit, she was clearly languishing and quickly moving towards the end. Mind you, I'm very respectful of the boundaries of hospice, and I only intervene if there is invitation and or if God clearly opens the door. After putting my guitar away, I felt a sudden burden on my heart to try and interact with her. To sense if there would be any invitation to minister. I held her hand. I explained to her that I respected her and had no agenda, but I felt compelled to ask her if she would like prayer. Again, I knew not. Sorry. Again, I knew not if she had any capacity to understand or respond. But after I spoke to her, she very gently squeezed my hand with her weak fingers. I know that even if the body is wasting away, the spirit is alive and well. But her response still caught me off guard. So I asked for confirmation, and again I received an ever so slight squeeze. So in the most open, respectful way I could, I spoke to her about God, that He was the source of all light and love and hope, that He was the source of her very life and breath. That life is not always fair, but God was waiting to embrace her and to heal her and to welcome her home, to reunite her with loved ones. And then I prayed and offered her up into God's loving arms. Burnout or not, I felt light shining through me in that moment, because God is faithful. God is the source. He owns the moment. And that light was illuminating her heart. As I was leaving, I spoke to the caregiver in the other room about the experience. And he told me a little bit about her story. He said that years ago, her husband had committed suicide. And that 2 years later, her son took his life as well. You never know the pain and despair that people live under. And you never know when opportunity will arise for you to be like the moon and the stars, shining in their darkest hour. Heavenly Father, we acknowledge that you are the source of all light, of all love, of all hope, of our breath and life. And we acknowledge that we need your light and love in our lives, not only to help us overcome our struggles, our failures, our trials, but we need your light and love to help us be like the moon and the stars to those who are in their darkest hours, who are desperate to find hope and peace. We pray in the name of your Son, the light of the world. Amen.